Hi everybody, welcome back to Shining Empathy. My name is Joel and this video is going to be a topic discussion about anxiety and depression. I'm going to focus primarily on anxiety, but it's kind of difficult to mention one without the other because very often they are tied together very significantly. One is just the extreme of the other. So I want to first talk about how I've had my own struggle with depression and anxiety. Most of the beginning of my journey was dealing with depression. And that was difficult enough, dealing with just that constant blanket of heaviness, sadness, not understanding why, suicidal thoughts, feeling like there was no way out of my situation or out of the feelings I was having. Eventually, things started to change and I started to have more anxiety come into the picture. And I think I've always been generally an anxious person, but it wasn't until I was probably in my 20s that I started to have very severe anxiety attacks, and then that escalated to panic attacks, where I would actually have sort of like seizures that would happen with them, where full-on body muscle spasms, and I wouldn't be able to move. I'd essentially have to go lay down in my bed when I would feel them coming on, and they would just come in waves where my body would just clench right up and I'd be shaking, and then it would just kind of come down. And I'd just have to let that pass, and it would get really intense for a while, and then it would pass, and then I would crash. I'd usually have to sleep afterwards. But it was always these onsets of panic that would start them. So having to deal with that, obviously I was going to have to manage that somehow. In this video, I want to talk about my journey with how I managed to kind of navigate through that for myself. What worked for me, what didn't. Now, I'm not going to say that what worked for me is going to be what works for you. All I'm hoping is that maybe some of you, if not all of you, can take something away from this video who can relate to this and maybe take something away and try something new maybe, or who knows, maybe maybe the journey that I've gone through is very similar to yours, and you'll be able to just kind of take away many of the things that I'm doing right now for myself, and it'll work for you. I really hope that's the case, but if not, I hope you do take something away from this video, even if it's just relating to the journey. So, a big part of what I had to figure out was the fact that my depression and anxiety was greatly related to being an empath. And of course, my channel is centered around, my empathic side, Shining Empathy. I am much more than that, and I don't like to label or categorize myself into any one box, so I would never just say, I am an empath, that is it. My intuitive abilities are constantly growing and expanding like everyone else's. I'm constantly working on them. They're growing every day with my readings. They're changing all the time. So it's more than just empathic. But the core of everything that I'm going to talk about is the empathic side. So I'm going to mention that. So I'm going to talk about first what it is to me. What is an empath? I don't think I've even ever talked about this. You'd think I'd maybe pop a video of what is an empath on my channel, but maybe at one point I'll make a little thing about that specifically. But tie it in here. So an empath is basically someone who is very open, energetically, spiritually, emotionally. And those people, like myself, soak up everything. Like a sponge, we just soak it right into ourselves. We can absorb it from people, from our environment, news, social media. We take it from everywhere, okay? So whatever it is, whether it's good or, I don't like to categorize things as good or bad, but no matter what it is, we soak it up. And because there are a lot of more negative spectrums out there these days, particularly in terms of like the news and the media, one of the things I had to start doing right away when I was realizing that this was part of the problem, the fact that I was absorbing all this stuff and it was directly feeding my depression and anxiety, was I had to start lessening my exposure to it. So one of the very first things I did was I stopped reading the news so much. I didn't keep myself completely out of the loop, but I certainly stopped making my usual routine: read the news, watch the news, look at everything on social media, get really emotionally involved in it. I just had to step away from it. And at first that felt really cold because I'd kept myself so open for so long that I thought that that was the only way to be open with the world. But it's not. And in fact, all it was doing was damaging me. So once I'd started doing that, at least I started making those connections, and things were getting a little bit better on that front. I had lessened my exposure to it, and I wasn't feeling so overloaded with it. But if you're an empath that's open as open as I was, to me it felt like I was feeling the pain of the whole world all at once sometimes, and if not all the time. It was like I couldn't shut down feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders all the time, and it put this responsibility in front of me that was like, I have to do something about this because it's so bad, it's just so intense, and I can't handle it. Like, I have to do something about it. So it felt like it was my responsibility to fix the world in a way, and I made it my responsibility in a big way, which just created this huge burden in my life for a long time because I couldn't figure out how to fix the world as one person. And I think we all know that you can't, as one person, just fix the whole world the way it is. We can do a lot. We can do a lot as an individual, but as a collective, we always do much more. So I think from there, what I might want to talk about, sorry, I'm just going to refer to my notes here a little bit. So I'd mentioned the idea of like filtering out the incoming data. Now, when I talk about data, I kind of think about the brain, the body, the energetic body. I think of it all as machines, and machines need constant upkeep, checkups, maintenance. And so when I think of data, I'm talking about information, emotions, energy that's all coming in. Okay? We send out data too, but it's more the stuff that was coming in as an empath, right? So it's about filtering out as much as you can the stuff that's really affecting you. There are things that temporarily worked for me, and maybe you guys have experienced this too, where you'll do something for a while and it just really seems to click, and you're just like, oh, this is it, I'm home, this is working. But then for whatever reason, you fall out of it, and you can't quite explain why. Things like that for me were diet. Oddly enough, I would find great connection to my anxiety in particular with my diet. So when I started getting rid of sugar and all this other stuff, and milk, and I cut out meat for years, and I felt a difference with that, but it was short-lived. It's still eventually the depression and the anxiety in particular. I'm gonna actually talk more about the anxiety now. The anxiety definitely kept creeping back in. Some other things that I tried that worked for a while were like yoga, meditation. All these things were just sort of like temporary fixes. They were just they were good for what I was going through, and they were helping me, but they weren't the full answer to what I needed. They were just sort of pieces of the puzzle, and maybe to be used in tandem. Or maybe they were even just sort of gateways and opportunities for me to see certain aspects of myself that I needed to work on. Whatever was the case, no matter how hard I tried to keep up with those things, they weren't the ultimate solution. And I kept looking for what the ultimate solution was. It certainly wasn't anything I had to do specifically. But one of the things that I really discovered that helped me on this journey was learning about myself. So when you experience something like anxiety or depression, there's a reason for that. It's coming from somewhere in your programming and how the pathways are wired in your brain. Our history, our makeup. It is so important for you to understand why you are the way you are. And it's not to judge it. It's not because it needs to be fixed. It is just simply that gaining an understanding into that gives us so much more awareness and power over our situation and ourselves. It means that we aren't the victims of our patterns and our defense mechanisms that we've established from when we were kids or before that. So one of the things I'm going to stress here is get to know yourself, and that includes the shadowy stuff and the light, okay? And when I say the shadowy stuff, I mean the stuff that scares the shit out of us. The stuff that we just don't want to look at. And I think that one of the things I might recommend for everybody, if you haven't already tried this, is get a therapist. Seeing a therapist can really help you work through so much of your history and your makeup, and really help you get sort of a foundation and a footing so you can at least begin the process of understanding why things surface the way they do during your day-to-day life, okay? Once you start getting that process down, you'll start seeing things sort of clicking and pieces of the puzzle falling into place, and you're like, oh, that's why this is happening. When I'm getting anxious, it's because of the way that my brain works here as a result of this situation and this situation when I was younger, et cetera, whatever the case is for you, but you start gaining that perspective and that understanding. One of the next pieces is no judgment. First of all, I'd like to say that I don't believe in necessarily, and this is going to sound bizarre, but I don't believe in right or wrong necessarily. I don't believe in good or bad, evil versus whatever. Even when I do categorize stuff, I generally try to keep it together because it is all one thing. All information, all emotion, all energy is neutral, okay? It's our perception and our judgment of emotions in particular that causes us to react to them in a certain way. So when we experience something like sadness, one of the first things we're kind of trained when we're little is that, oh, that's a very disliked emotion. We don't like that. And we want to make sure, here, let me try and make you happy because we don't like sadness. Or we don't like anger, so let's try and get you away from anger. There's nothing wrong with any of those emotions. It's our judgment that creates the problem. So start taking a more neutral perspective. If you're having something like an anxiety or panic attack, try not to give it that fear base. Try not to literally sit there and panic about what's happening. And anxiety feeds anxiety. You can have anxiety about something you're perceiving as anxiety, even if it's just an intense sensation that isn't necessarily anxiety. If you perceive it as anxiety and you're scared of anxiety, you're going to give yourself a panic attack. You're going to give yourself more anxiety. It's just a really awful feedback loop that can happen just based on how we're judging a feeling in a moment, okay? So keeping that in mind, with the whole idea that have that neutral perspective, just try and observe as if you were sitting outside yourself. Imagine for a moment, while you're having this anxiety attack or whatever emotional situation you're in, depression, whatever, try and step outside yourself for a second as if you were a friend of yours who obviously, was, not feeling what you were feeling and was just trying to observe you and try and figure out what was going on. Ask yourself things like, all right, what's going on in my body right now? What am I feeling in my body right now? Instead of trying to label the emotion, because sometimes we mislabel emotions, and we can give a more complex emotion something very surfacey or something very judged, like anxiety. Even though it might not necessarily be anxiety, if we call it anxiety, that comes with an attachment and we immediately do something with that. Just observe what's happening. Go through your body. Are you tense anywhere? Are you holding yourself kind of, are you hunching? Is your heart racing? Are you sweating? And just neutrally observe and just go through. Observe your body and your physiology and just go through it all and just state what's going on with your body. Then if you want, start saying, how's that making you feel? If you can just not judge anything that you're experiencing and just go through the neutral observation phase, that's going to give you such a huge tool in regards to dealing with anxiety. In fact, what I've found is that just going through the process of even trying to neutrally observe already starts taking me down from where I was, from this high-pitched anxiety that's usually just going up and up. it brings me down sometimes so quickly that I don't even get a chance to really fully observe what was happening. I've been brought down so quickly, which is a great thing. You know, we kind of want to come back down from that because we don't necessarily enjoy being up in that state. But again, try not to judge it, okay? We're experiencing these things for a reason. They keep coming up for a reason, okay? Try and remember that this is not just happening because there's something wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you, but this is happening for a reason, okay? I want to also talk about thoughts. And I've had this discussion with many people about how some people, especially who don't have much spirituality, tend to think that they are their thoughts. And I can't think of a more depressing idea of who and what we are if we think that we are our thoughts. Our thoughts are just a stream of consciousness pouring in at any time. If you were sitting with yourself, now here I can actually prove that you aren't your thoughts, okay? If you just sit for a moment, almost like meditating, and observe the thoughts. Okay, so I have a thought about what I had for lunch today, and you observe that thought, okay, and you let it pass. The next thought that comes in. And you just keep observing the thoughts that flow by, okay? But without attaching yourself to any of them. It's only when we attach ourselves to a thought that we think we are that thought, okay? If you can observe them without attaching yourself to them, I ask the question, who or what is observing those thoughts? Bam. You are not your thoughts. If you can observe something, then you are not that thing. Okay? You are the thing that is observing. So you are not your thoughts. Okay? Really try and get that down, because having certain thoughts that we, especially when, again, back to the whole judgment thing, that we judge as positive or negative or good or bad, we can really start thinking that who and what we are is really, there's something wrong with us, or that maybe our core essence is kind of evil or tainted in some way. Because the thoughts that we have, even as random and maybe awful as they may seem, we are not those thoughts. No matter what they are that are coming through, no matter how awful they may seem, we are not our thoughts. Okay, I can't stress that enough. Affirmations. Okay? This is sort of a problem and solution here. Think about any time you say the phrase, I am. I am anxious. I am depressed. Are you actually those things, or are you just experiencing them? So another way to start rephrasing those things, especially when you catch yourself thinking or saying those things, would be to say, I just caught myself saying I am anxious, since we're talking specifically about anxiety for this video. So one of the ways that you could rephrase that is, I am experiencing anxiety. Boom. We are no longer identifying ourselves as anxiety, but are now identifying ourselves as something that is just experiencing something else. And that creates more of a detachment from the anxiety. Again, these are all little things that you have to all kind of put together for yourselves. And it's a lot. I know that what I'm saying here is a lot, but like if you can just take some of these things, even on a daily basis, and just start putting them together, the pieces will start to click. So start detaching yourself from those things. As I was saying, the I am is a problem and a solution. So one of the things that really started to change things for me was when I was told during one of my own readings from someone else that I needed to create a list of affirmations for myself. I needed to imagine a future version of myself that I wanted to be, okay? And all the qualities of this future version of myself that I wanted to have, I had to use the words I am as if I had those qualities right now. And I wrote them all down, and I actually posted them, I think, on my Facebook page a while back, months ago. But it was just, I am calm and grounded, I am relaxed, I am peaceful, I am happy with who I am. It was this whole list of affirmations of things I wanted to feel and be right here and now. And I looked at that, if not literally out loud, recited that list of I am every single day. And things started to change because the things that I was saying I am, I wasn't saying anymore. I had a new list of things in front of me that I was driving into my head as who and what I wanted to be. So keep in mind that the I am can be a dangerous thing and it can also be a solution, okay? Just try and catch yourself anytime you use the words I am. Just like anytime you hear the word should in your head. If you're hearing, well, you know, blah, 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 I shouldn't do this, blah, 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 you know, I shouldn't feel this way. Why shouldn't you feel that way? Or why are you trying to invalidate how you're feeling? That voice that can sound very helpful in your head is just another defense mechanism that's trying to move your programming to a certain way and trying to get you to go down a certain path in terms of how you react to something. So watch the should and shouldn't in your thoughts as well. So I think now I want to just talk more about the daily practices that have worked for me. So something, again, that I am still including in almost every day is a little bit of meditation. Even if it's just for a few minutes, I try and get a little bit of meditation in every day. It wasn't the solution, like I said, on its own, but it has helped. Now, I'm sure that many of you who know me understand this already, but for those who don't, I'm going to clarify. My perception of the world is I think of things in energy, frequency, okay, vibration. So most of the time I'm talking about things in terms of energy. My practices that I take for myself, especially in any given situation, if I'm feeling like an anxiety attack's coming on, I go through all that other stuff that I've just talked about. I understand my makeup, I understand where a lot of it's coming from. But as an empath, and as I'm pretty sure it's developing into a psychic as well, I'm picking up on a lot more other stuff that would have normally triggered anxiety, but isn't necessarily anxiety in itself. So it was just a matter of gaining understanding into that. So in a moment, if it's just feeling like it's too much, whatever it is, first of all, I don't put any judgment on it. Usually I try and do a check, is this really mine or am I picking this up from somewhere else? It's going to be mine soon if I attach myself to it because my anxiety will create this anxiety. Okay? But in the beginning, it isn't necessarily mine. It might have come from somewhere else. So I try and do that check-in with myself. Is this mine? And I'm going to say 90% of the time or more, it's not. It originally wasn't mine. It might trigger my stuff because a lot of stuff does that. It triggers our own stuff and we always think it's ours, especially as empaths, okay? But it isn't necessarily the root of the situation. So once I've checked in with myself and I'm like, no, I don't think this is mine. Even if it is mine, I still go through this routine here. I do grounding, and I think I have talked about grounding practices on my channel, so check that out. I do clearing immediately after, and I've also talked about that, I believe. And then I do protection, and I've talked about that as well. I do all three of those things in tandem. Boom, 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 in that order. Ground, clear, protect. It is so important to do all those three things together for me, just because I was only doing one, or, I'd only be doing protection, but that wasn't necessarily clearing my energy field. I'd only be doing clearing, but then I wouldn't be protecting myself or grounding myself, and then I'd be just floating off. I had to be doing all three of those things together and in that order. So I highly recommend that in any situation, even if it's just a daily practice, even if you're not experiencing anything like anxiety, just try and make that a daily practice. For me now, I've got it down to the point where I'm just, in any situation, several times a day, I go through that list. Ground, clear, protect. Okay? I'm probably going to do a video unto itself of literally how like exactly what I go through with my ground, clear, and protect on its own. So kind of stay tuned for that. But just for now, just know that it's ground, clear, protect. The fourth thing that is important, but not as important as those three, is string cutting. Everything and everyone in this world, in this universe, is connected. And you can think of it as strings that connect us all, okay? So if I start thinking about somebody, I have strings that I've attached to them, and I've literally traveled right down those strings, and I'm connecting my energy to theirs. Picking up on all their stuff as an empath, maybe even pulling it right into my own field. It's important to cut strings. And again, this is one of those things that as an empath, because we're always so open, this can feel cold, like we're cutting off the world or we're cutting people off. It can feel wrong in a way, but it is important for our daily maintenance and our daily health to keep that up. So if you find yourself thinking about somebody or replaying a situation with someone over and over again, wondering if you could have said something different, or you're just replaying something over and over again, or you're constantly forecasting some future event with somebody and like worried about a situation, a confrontation or something, you are attaching strings to that person, and or they have attached strings to you, and you guys are just picking up on each other's energy like crazy. More so the empath out of this case is soaking it up, because us empaths, we're sponges, we just soak it right up. So string cutting is literally imagining something like a sword just going around. Like I actually imagine just either a sword by itself or even someone like Archangel Michael, just because he's the warrior to me. And they're just cutting the strings everywhere. If it's not to anyone in particular, I just see strings going everywhere, and I just see them being cut all around me. And if it is to someone in particular, something that can kind of help, like if someone in particular, like a friend, someone you're in confrontation with, a partner, whoever is giving you anxiety, and that situation is giving you anxiety, and you want to sever yourself from that person, that situation for the time being, do the string cutting like I said. Like imagine they're sitting in front of you and you just cut the strings, like a great big cleaver just comes down and just cuts all the strings between you. And then imagine that they're walking away from you with their backs turned, and they walk through a door, and as they shut that door, say, "Thank you, goodbye." And do that as many times as you need until you start feeling like you're not thinking about it and obsessing about that person, that situation so much. And it will happen. You'll notice that, like maybe it takes a few times at first, but it will happen, and you'll realize that, wow, I'm feeling so much better ever since I did that exercise. I can't believe it. At least that was my experience. So just going to check if I missed anything here, because I did want to cover so much in this video. There are a couple things here that I wanted to talk about in terms of blocks, like energy blocks, but I think I'm going to save that for another video, just because this ties into this stuff, but it isn't as important as everything else that I've discussed. Keep in mind the idea of resistance and allowance. And this has greatly to do with the whole idea of judging something, but even more so, think resist, allow. If we're experiencing something like anxiety and we resist it, one of the first things we might do, like if we're feeling our hearts race, is we compress. And we hold that energy there, and we just compress. And that's a resistance, and that will actually just create that feedback loop, and it will just eventually amplify. We're not allowing it to move anywhere. We're literally just storing it even further inside our own bodies and our own energy. So if you felt like, say, anxiety in your chest or in your stomach, try and open yourself up a little bit. It's scarier to do that, but this works better. And just try to allow the feeling. Again, that's part of the neutrally observing, when you're just observing the sensations you're having. The allowing sort of naturally happens in that way. But also kind of keep in mind the idea of, am I resisting or am I allowing? Okay, and if you're allowing, then you'll just be neutrally observing. If you're resisting, you'll be judging it and being like, oh, I hate this, oh, I don't like this, oh, I'm shutting it down. And you'll literally try to shut it down. You'll try to stop it, or you'll try to retreat away from it. A lot of energetic defense mechanisms, and which can be directly related to psychological defense mechanisms, they're the exact same thing really, just two different ways of talking about it, is the idea of how we move energy. And two of the big ones to me are stop, like we just stop the energy, and we withdraw. The idea is literally our consciousness, we pull it right up and out of our body, and then everything here is just vulnerable. Our bodies get weaker, we get sick more often, we're more vulnerable to psychic attack, emotional attack. Just keep those things in mind, the idea of, am I resisting or am I allowing what's happening to me right now? Because that can really shift the experience. It can really just turn it on its head, and it might not change that you're experiencing what you're experiencing, it might not stop it, but it just will shift your perspective, which can completely change how you're reacting to it, okay? Whew. I think that's pretty much everything that I want to talk about in this video. So like I said, stay tuned. I'm pretty sure I'm going to follow up with this with a ground, clear, and protect segment. Everybody, I hope this helps. I hope this connects. I can't tell you how difficult the journey was for me, especially with my anxiety. I'm actually going to rephrase that. With the anxiety I was experiencing. It's the whole my anxiety thing. It's very similar to I am. The anxiety that I was experiencing for many years, it was very, very difficult. It was debilitating. It was starting to force me to like not want to go out anywhere. The panic attacks I was having was making me feel like I was just dying all the time, like I was having a heart attack, like, okay, I'm dying. You don't want to be in that place. Like, nobody wants to be in that place all the time. Again, like I said, we're experiencing this for a reason, but we don't have to be, okay? There are other things that we can experience. So I hope that some of this has somehow connected with you. I don't know what degree of severity that maybe if some of you are experiencing depression or anxiety, if you have anxiety attacks and panic attacks in particular, but mine actually would become one of my very first panic attacks was it was an out-of-body experience. And if maybe one day I'll do a segment and talk about that out-of-body experience, but it was a very traumatic experience, and it sort of scarred me for a while. And after that, the panic attacks became a regular thing. And it was almost like I would have flashbacks to that out-of-body experience and that first initial big panic attack, and then they just rippled out from there and kept on happening. So again, I hope that you guys connected with this at least to some degree. I hope something helpful came through for you in terms of tools, cognitive behavioral therapy tools that maybe that you can use that I've suggested here. I'm gonna end on that note. Thank you so much for listening. If you liked this video, if you like this topic discussion, please go ahead and like the video. And if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, Shining Empathy, and if you want, you can check me out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at Shining Empathy. And until next time, everyone, and I'm about to actually do my readings for the week and for a couple other ones. So I will see you guys then. Love and light to you all. Bye for now.